below the Earth's surface. We haven't talked about geologic hydrogen in this committee before, but it's gaining momentum. And we must ensure the United States continues to lead the world in advanced energy technologies by using all of our abundant resources in the cleanest way possible, including all types of hydrogen, to safeguard our country's energy security. I want to thank our witnesses for being here to provide their valuable perspective from the administration and private sector on the opportunities for geologic hydrogen to become a part of America's energy system. We've talked a lot about how hydrogen can give us the same horsepower as our baseload fossil fuels for industrial manufacturing, transportation, dispatchable electric power, and more. And industry knows it. In fact, the Department of Energy predicts demand for hydrogen to increase tenfold by 2030 in the United States, and it has the potential to decarbonize up to 25% of the global energy emissions. The development of hydrogen industry is also expected to promote new economic opportunities for Americans and create over 100,000 new good-paying jobs, particularly exciting for the areas that have historically carried the load of powering our nation, such as West Virginia and Wyoming and New Mexico and Colorado. Now, hydrogen isn't a new concept, but it wasn't nurtured in the same way some other energy technologies have been to get to maturity. Congress acted to rectify that and support exponential growth for the hydrogen industry by providing tools and incentives in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act to help make all types of hydrogen cost competitive. Specifically, this committee provided DOE with $8 billion to pursue hydrogen hub projects. And I think you want to put we're going to keep this up for you all to see where they're located. Those are the 7 that have been awarded the hydrogen hubs, which we're excited about. They put $1.5 billion for hydrogen technology research and development and $750 million for small and medium-sized businesses to manufacture clean energy technologies like hydrogen in coal communities. We doubled down in the Inflation Reduction Act with the creation of the first ever clean hydrogen production tax credit to incentivize the production of clean hydrogen. Fast forward to today, and 7 hydrogen hub projects have been chosen across 16 states, representing ground zero of what will be a national clean hydrogen industry. West Virginia is proud to be partnered with the Appalachian Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub, known as ARCH2, as part of the DOE's Hydrogen Hub program. The impact of ARCH2 is substantial, with the project expected to result in over $5 billion of new investment, thousands of new high-paying jobs, and public-private partnerships that will create a network for hydrogen manufacturing and production in West Virginia. And each one of the other hubs have the same outcome, basically expedition and expansion that we're all expecting. And I know many of our committee members are excited about similar benefits that they're going to expect also. But the laws we pass will only be successful if this administration implements them as written and abandons its efforts to impose extreme limitations on the hydrogen tax credit that weren't included, were never considered, were never even talked about in the law. They were all made up, and we're not going to stand for it. This is an egregious example of an agency overstepping the authorities Congress has provided for them. Nowhere, as I said before, in the IRA will you find language authorizing Treasury to limit hydrogen credits only to those producers who get energy from additional new power plants, or to require producers to match the hour of power generation with the hour of hydrogen production, or to restrict the location where electricity for hydrogen is sourced from. Can you imagine building and investing the billions of dollars it'll take for the electrolyzers that run 24/7 and expecting wind and solar to power them 24 hours a day? Doesn't make any sense at all. And unfortunately, the hydrogen tax credit, just one example in a long line of the administration trying to implement the law that they wanted, not the one that we passed. The administration takes the most liberal view possible for credits that benefit the industries the extreme left likes, like EVs and solar, and most restrictive view possible when it comes to incentives for industries that these activists oppose, like hydrogen and critical mineral production credits. In this case, the administration initially celebrated the announcement of the Hub Awards, and we all have, and the jobs that they're going to be created. However, now they have bent to pressure to obstruct hydrogen development, which will kill every one of these, and the progress that was intended and that was being made. Just this week, all 7 hydrogen hubs, again representing major investments in 16 states, wrote to the administration urging them to change course on proposed rules for the hydrogen tax credits that threaten the success of the hubs. I want you to know, this is the first time, I think, in my long line of public service that I've ever had California, a hydrogen hub in California, agree with a hydrogen hub in Appalachia. It's never happened before. So to have all of us on the same page tells you how serious this is. I'm glad the hubs are making their concerns known. I'm going to support them every step of the way, pushing back on the administration's unlawful proposal, and I think all of us that represent these areas where the hubs are located feel the same. Let me now pivot back to geologic hydrogen and the spur of new activity we're seeing, both to map and access naturally occurring hydrogen underground to develop ways of producing hydrogen underground. Knowing where the hydrogen reserves are is fundamental to advancing geologic hydrogen as an energy source to help meet the nation's future energy needs. The USGS's Energy Resource Program maps and conducts scientific research on geological resources and their supply chains, including the geologic hydrogen. Specifically, Earth, MRI, and USGS's mapping program, which was authorized in the bipartisan infrastructure law, provides essential data for identifying areas with mineral and geological hydrogen potential. Meanwhile, the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy at the Department of Energy, better known by its acronym ARPA-E, recently announced 16 new geologic hydrogen projects awarded to the universities, national labs, and companies that will propel innovation and growth in the geologic hydrogen industry. I'm pleased to say that Shepherdstown, West Virginia will be hosting ARPA-E's Geologic Hydrogen Kickoff event in May. This event will serve as the launch point for numerous new ARPA-E and other federally funded geological hydrogen projects. As America's energy powerhouse, West Virginia is excited to be supporting these advanced energy technologies. With all that we have accomplished through recent legislation, I know this committee remains committed to fostering the growth of hydrogen in the United States due to its potential to reshape our energy landscape, create economic opportunities, and contribute to ensuring our energy security. We look forward to continuing our work with the DOE, the USGS, and the private sector in this area. And I look forward to hearing our witnesses' perspectives today on advancing geologic hydrogen. With that, I'm going to turn to Ranking Member Barrasso for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding today's hearing. The Energy Information Administration projects that the world demand for energy is going to increase by 34% by the year 2050. To meet this demand, our nation is going to need more of every type of energy, and that includes hydrogen. Hydrogen offers many advantages. It's light, abundant, especially energy dense. Hydrogen is also very clean. When combusted with oxygen, hydrogen emits only water vapor and warm air. Widely believed that we will need hydrogen in order to reduce emissions in sectors of the economy that use large amounts of energy. That includes steel, concrete production, transportation, electricity generation. For years, our attention on hydrogen production has been focused on using natural gas or cracking water through a process called electrolysis. Today, we're going to look at the potential to tap underground deposits of pure hydrogen, also known as geologic hydrogen. Geologic hydrogen is formed when water reacts with iron-rich rock at high temperatures underground. Scientists have long known that water and iron-rich rock produce hydrogen. Until recently, they believed that hydrogen would not remain in a pure state for very long. They believed hydrogen would bond with other elements like oxygen to form water or carbon to form hydrocarbons. They believed that hydrogen would be eaten by microbes or escape to the surface and into the atmosphere. Scientists have recently found that in some areas, deposits of pure hydrogen can remain trapped. When this happens, the hydrogen accumulates. And if enough hydrogen accumulates, the hydrogen can be extracted like oil and gas. The scientific community and private sector are cautiously optimistic that the world contains large reserves of geologic hydrogen. Dr. Ellis, one of our witnesses, has estimated that even if just a small fraction of these reserves is economically recoverable, it would meet the world's projected demand for hydrogen for hundreds of years. In December, The Economist ran an article about geologic hydrogen, Mr. Chairman, right here, the rush for colorless gold. The Economist, and he said, the diagram of how they do that. It's a very, very thorough, good article. It quotes the leader of one geologic hydrogen company, stating that he holds the, quote, unpopular view that science and innovation are likely to come to our rescue on climate as they did over COVID. Republicans have advocated for reducing carbon emissions through innovation, and quoting you, innovation, not regulation.
Elimination.
And without elimination. Geologic hydrogen is purely an area that we should pursue. Companies exploring for geologic hydrogen use many of the same technologies that are used for oil and the oil and gas industry. In fact, many of the people exploring for hydrogen today spent their careers exploring for oil and gas. These are many of the same people and technologies that have made the United States the world leader in oil and gas production. In my view, geologic hydrogen, unlike wind, solar, and electric batteries, plays to America's strength, not those of China. Scientists and companies exploring for geologic hydrogen are looking to make hydrogen production as affordable, reliable, and clean as possible. Glad to say the University of Wyoming is participating in these efforts. While there's still much to learn, today's hearing will shed light on the opportunities and challenges ahead. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us here today and look forward to hearing the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. And now we're going to have three of our witnesses. We have the Honorable Dr. Evelyn Wang. She's Director at the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy. We have Dr. Jeffrey Ellis, Energy Resources Program Lead for Geologic Hydrogen at the U.S. Geological Survey. And then we have Mr. Pete Johnson, co-founder and CEO of Coloma. And we'll start with Dr. Wang. And if you have any of your family members here, we'd like for you to introduce them. It'd be very nice. Okay? Okay. Okay, Doctor, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and distinguished members of this committee. It is my privilege to appear before you today to represent the Department of Energy as Director of the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy, commonly known as ARPA-E. Our agency is tasked with supporting the research and development of high-risk, high-reward energy technologies that have the potential to fundamentally change the way we generate, use, and store energy. Today, I am pleased to appear before you to discuss this important topic of geologic hydrogen. ARPA-E's support of this topic aligns with our mission of disrupting learning curves and creating new markets. Hydrogen is an element that can be used to cleanly produce heat and electricity and is relevant to reducing harmful emissions from some of the most energy-intensive sectors of the economy, such as chemical and industrial processes like ammonia and steel, and heavy-duty transportation. It can be produced from a variety of domestic resources, such as natural gas, nuclear power, biomass, and renewable power like solar and wind. Hydrogen has end uses across almost all sectors, from industrial to commercial, transportation, agriculture, and more. Historically, hydrogen can store and deliver usable energy as a carrier, but as an element, not much is found in the atmosphere due to its reactivity and lightweight. Consequently, it is typically produced from compounds that contain it. Geologic hydrogen presents a unique opportunity where advanced technologies can stimulate and extract hydrogen directly from the Earth's subsurface. The realization of these technologies would make hydrogen a primary energy source, in addition to a carrier of energy, potentially increasing the domestic supply of hydrogen and lowering costs of this form of energy for millions of Americans. Given recent interest in the discovery of naturally accumulating deposits of subsurface hydrogen, ARPA-E is interested in accessing these deposits and exploring the possibility of developing this source of hydrogen. By advancing transformative technologies that would enable the stimulation and extraction of this hydrogen, we could potentially yield larger quantities of it than are currently produced. To that end, in September 2023, ARPA-E announced $20 million in available support for teams to be a part of this historic effort to advance the research and development of this technology. ARPA-E selected 18 projects across 9 states, part of this funding opportunity announcement. While simply extracting the current supply of naturally accumulating hydrogen in and of itself can enhance the U.S. energy economy, ARPA-E is committing research support to explore a potentially disruptive step in the process. Through understanding how we can artificially stimulate these deposits, there is a theoretical potential to produce enough clean hydrogen to impact U.S. energy demand. Therefore, the funding announced in September is part of 2 ARPA-E exploratory topics. The first explores research into the stimulation processes. The second focuses on technologies relevant to the management and extraction of hydrogen from geologic reservoirs. The historic significance of this moment is clear, with this being the first time that the U.S. government has competitively selected teams to research this technology. The potential for geologic hydrogen represents a paradigm shift in the way we think about hydrogen as an energy source. If our programs show success, this new source of hydrogen could lower energy costs and increase our nation's energy security and supply chains. In addition, existing technology, infrastructure, and workforce capabilities from industries such as geothermal, oil, gas, and mining may be leveraged for the stimulation and extraction of geologic hydrogen. We understand the inherent risks of this early-stage research and recognize this risk is essential in ARPA-E's mission to enhance American innovation. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Doctor. And now we'll have Dr. Jeffrey Ellis. He's our Energy Resource Program Lead for Geological Hydrogen at the U.S. Geological Survey. Thank you, Dr. Ellis.
Good morning, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify before you today on the opportunities and challenges associated with developing geologic hydrogen resources. My name is Jeff Ellis, and I lead the research efforts into understanding the resource potential of geologic hydrogen in the U.S. Geological Survey, or USGS. The existence of naturally occurring hydrogen is well documented in many geologic environments, with the notable exception of petroleum reservoirs. Out of millions of oil and gas wells that have been drilled around the globe, only a few dozen oil fields have been documented to contain more than trace levels of hydrogen. This led many geoscientists to conclude that economic accumulations of hydrogen in the subsurface are non-existent. However, the accidental discovery of geologic hydrogen gas accumulation in Mali, West Africa, about 12 years ago brought about a re-examination of this notion. There are now a growing number of geoscientists who recognize that we simply have not looked for geologic hydrogen in the right places with the right tools. The geologic setting of the hydrogen accumulation in Mali is not unique, which suggests that geologic hydrogen accumulations could be widespread. In the wake of this discovery, active exploration for geologic hydrogen has begun in Brazil, Colombia, and elsewhere. And research into this potential low-carbon energy resource has taken off, particularly in France and Australia. In the United States, the first well specifically targeting a geologic hydrogen accumulation was drilled in the state of Nebraska in 2019. Several additional hydrogen exploration wells have been drilled in the United States since then, and more are planned for later this year. The USGS began investigating geologic hydrogen resource potential in 2021. The USGS recently developed a model of global hydrogen resource potential based on known properties of hydrogen and well-understood accumulations of other geologic resources such as petroleum, geothermal energy, and noble gases like helium. According to the model, the estimated in-place global geologic hydrogen resource ranges from thousands to potentially billions of megatons or million metric tons. However, the model makes no prediction about the spatial distribution of this resource. Given our understanding of other geologic resources, the vast majority of the in-place hydrogen is likely to be in accumulations that are too deep, too far offshore, or too small to ever be economically recovered. However, if even a small fraction of this amount could be recovered, that would constitute a significant resource. More geoscience research and data collection is needed to better understand where natural accumulations of hydrogen might be found. Fortunately, we have extensive experience from petroleum, geothermal, and hydrothermal mineral resource exploration that can be applied to understanding geologic hydrogen resources. Building on that experience, the USGS is developing a conceptual geologic model to refine our understanding of the potential for hydrogen accumulation in the subsurface. The USGS model will initially be applied to mapping the relative likelihood of the presence of geologic hydrogen resources across the lower 48 states of the U.S. In addition to our mapping efforts, we are collaborating with the Colorado School of Mines and a consortium of industry partners to advance the geoscience related to geologic hydrogen and to investigate exploration methods needed to develop this potential resource. Another significant area of research is the potential to stimulate hydrogen generation in the subsurface, which is distinct from its natural occurrence. We are partnering with the U.S. Department of Energy to identify the geologic conditions under which new technologies may be applied in ways that are effective, safe, and protective of local communities' health and the environment. Advancement of stimulation technologies could substantially add to our current estimate of the global potential for economically recoverable geologic hydrogen. In summary, our current understanding suggests that the amount of naturally occurring hydrogen in the Earth's interior is likely to be large. However, the potential for this hydrogen to be present in accumulations that could be economically, safely, and responsibly recovered is currently unknown. Research is now underway at the USGS to improve our understanding of this novel resource that can help provide a low-carbon and secure supply of energy to our nation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Now we have Mr. Pete Johnson. I believe you have some family members here, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce my mother, who was born in D.C. and came here to witness the event. Stand up, Mom.
Stand up. Thank you for being here.
I bring her to every important meeting I go to.
Well,
so.
it's always good to have your mom with you, especially in these meetings.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and other distinguished members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you about geologic hydrogen and its potential to benefit the United States. My name is Pete Johnson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Coloma. I'm the father of 4 active kids, and I love nothing more than spending time with my wife and them outside enjoying the forests, the mountains, the coastlines of this beautiful country. I'm passionate about clean energy, and I believe I have a moral responsibility to do what I can to benefit the health of both my children and the planet. I'm also a pragmatist. I'm an engineer by training, and I'm an entrepreneur. I've designed and built clean energy facilities in the Southwest United States, in Australia, in India along the Pakistan border, and most recently in Nebraska. I've founded and built multiple clean energy companies, including another successful clean hydrogen business. And I've also worked as an investor in a traditional energy fund focused on energy transition opportunities. I first learned about the concept of geologic hydrogen 3 years ago while working in the investment industry. I was very skeptical. Everybody is looking for a silver bullet in the clean energy business. This one seemed too good to be true. In the last 12 months, Science Magazine, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Economist that Senator Barrasso lifted up, they've all featured this and they've highlighted this field and its potential. But 3 years ago, there was very, very little to go by. I was curious enough back then, and I dug into as much data as I could find. And it became clear to me that the science of hydrogen formation in the subsurface was real. It was indisputable. The reaction between water and iron-rich rock happens, and hydrogen seeps are present on all 6 continents and have been well studied. Hydrogen is seeping out of the mid-Atlantic seafloor. Hydrogen is coming out in the steam in Iceland and the Geysers geothermal plant in California. I've worked in the hydrogen business for a long time, and I did the math. If geologic hydrogen accumulations can be found, this would change the hydrogen business dramatically and have a massive advantage in terms of cost and availability. It would open up new avenues for decarbonization that just aren't possible now. But the key questions remained. Are there accumulations that are large enough to matter? Are they close enough to markets? can we find them with a high enough hit rate to justify the high cost of exploration activities? During my process, I was introduced to Dr. Tom Dara, a tenured geology and geochemistry professor at The Ohio State University. Tom had spent the better part of 20 years collecting and analyzing data around geologic hydrogen from 6 continents and was widely recognized as the world expert in the field. I saw that the analytical tools and technology that Tom had developed could be further honed to create a strong advantage in finding commercially relevant geologic hydrogen reserves. We brought in other experts in resource exploration who agreed that technical advantages we had would help de-risk the effort. At that point, Tom and I, along with another co-founder, Paul Haraka, invested our personal capital alongside a seed investor and founded Coloma in 2021 as a data-driven, technology-enhanced geologic hydrogen exploration company. Today, Coloma has 35 employees who are a unique mix of geologists, data scientists, traditional energy resource professionals, and hydrogen experts. Coloma has offices and facilities in Denver, Colorado, and at The Ohio State University. We've been actively gathering and analyzing data, conducting lab experiments, leasing mineral rights, and exploring in prospective regions in the United States. We're very excited about the opportunity and what we're seeing. I'd like to share a few key points about geologic hydrogen's potential impact on the U.S.'s efforts towards decarbonization. First, geologic hydrogen is domestic primary energy. All other forms of hydrogen require more energy to produce than the hydrogen itself holds. But geologic hydrogen is a source of energy. Senator Barrasso pointed out that demand increasing is just going up. Adding energy into the system is a critical element of decarbonization. Second, this is incredibly clean energy. In multiple third-party life cycle analyses and peer-reviewed journal articles, geologic hydrogen has been found to have a very low carbon footprint, akin to renewables-powered electrolyzers. In addition, geologic hydrogen will result in lower land use and lower water consumption than any other form of hydrogen. And last, this is a great way to leverage the enormous talent base and talent advantage the U.S. has built in resource exploration and production. Downstream facilities will leverage that as well. I'd like to conclude by noting that this will not be easy. This will take time, money, and effort to figure out. Nobody has all the answers today. But the early data looks promising, and I believe that geologic hydrogen can play a very large role as we decarbonize the U.S. energy economy. The efforts we put in now to commercialize this will be worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Now we're going to start with our questions, and I'll lead off with Dr. Wang, this will be for you. The greenhouse gas regulated emissions and energy use in transportation model, otherwise called GREET, is a tool used to evaluate the emissions of hydrogen production for the 45V hydrogen production tax credit. Earlier this month, ARPA-E awarded a grant to the Argonne National Laboratory to develop the GREET model to include a method for calculating the emissions of geologic hydrogen. Can you provide more information on when the update to the GREET model will be complete so that geologic hydrogen producers can use it to determine their tax credit values?
Thank you, Chairman Manchin, for that question. Indeed, an important part to be able to make geological hydrogen now applicable to the 45V tax credit is indeed having the life cycle analysis to understand the amount of emissions from the CO2 emissions from geologic hydrogen. So we did fund Argonne National Lab as part of our exploratory topic work to now incorporate geologic hydrogen and doing the life cycle analysis for it. And so we expect that to be done by the end of the year. And so not only can our researchers access it, but make it now open to anyone that wants to access that module, that model, to be able to now apply for to be able to make it applicable for the tax credit.
What was the time period again?
Time period is by the end of the year.
End of the year. Okay. Mr. Johnson, this will be for you. Speaking as you have, and you're being I think the lead company in the country, really, doing what you're doing. Committee members, I think that we all agree that to develop new energy sources like geologic hydrogen, we're concerned about the workers and a lot of the people as we transition our energy portfolio. Hydrogen seems to me to have the most consistent of what we're doing today, but doing it cleaner with hydrogen versus traditional sources that we use now. Do you see that transition being the skill sets we have? Do we have to retrain, or the heavy lifting that hydrogen can do with trucks, diesels, trains, planes, and everything in between?
I think a big benefit that geologic hydrogen brings is it can really tap into the existing talent base. It's not a perfect fit.
Sure.
This is a different kind of rock. There are different challenges that have to be sorted out. But if you just look at our team of geologists, geochemists, reservoir engineers, drilling engineers, land professionals, this looks and feels a lot like another resource play. We have different science going on, but we can put the workforce to work doing clean hydrogen. I would say a lot of people in the oil and gas industry who are really interested in moving into energy transition, they see this as an incredible opportunity.
Let me ask you this. The hydrogen we have right now that you all have been tapped into, you know that we have those reserves of clean hydrogen in the ground now that can be extracted. Can they be put into the market same as natural gas is as we extract that, or oil?
Well, I'd say, one of the challenges we have, right, it's similar to oil and gas 50, 100 years ago, is that there's not a massive distribution system for moving hydrogen back and forth. So my view is the initial commercial production reservoirs of hydrogen, geologic hydrogen, will end up being used near the point of production by ammonia plants or other facilities built close by. I think that, you might have to wait a period of time to see a large enough basin develop to start to see pipelines. So can
the same pipeline system we have now, can hydrogen be used in that same type of transportation?
I would say that the jury is out on that. All of the pipeline companies are studying this, and there's views that you can go up to 5 or 10 or 20%. I think the jury's out on that. I'm not enough of a metallurgist to make more comment than that.
Thank you. Dr. Ellis, the USGS has stated they are actively engaging in several endeavors to evaluate the potential of our geologic hydrogen reserves. What states or areas in the U.S. have potential geologic hydrogen resources have you identified?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Manchin. At this time, I can't give you an exact answer to that question. That's something that we are currently in the process of working on. So the answer will be evolving over time as we get more data coming in. But I can tell you in our initial efforts, we see areas along the east coast of the United States, actually all the way from New Jersey down to Georgia as being potential.
Are we talking like the shale play was? I mean, we have Marcellus, Utica in our area, and you have the Permian and all the different shale plays that are going on. Is that where you seem to be able to identify or not?
No, this would be independent from the shales, actually.
Gotcha.
This is related to offshore iron-rich rocks that could be a source for hydrogen, and then it would be migrating towards the coastline. Another prospective area is the Mid-Continent Rift, where we have ultramafic rocks, these iron-rich rocks that extend all the way from northeast Kansas up through Nebraska, Iowa, and into Minnesota, and over up into Ontario, and then down into Michigan are also an area that we think is highly prospective. This is based on our understanding of where the source rocks are most likely to be, but it's complicated. We need to have the reservoirs in this field. Excuse me?
What's your timetable to identify? Because we're not going to go out and start drilling until you tell us where to go.
No, well, two things on that. The timetable is that we are aiming to get our initial map of prospectivity for the U.S. by the end of this year. But the second key point here is that once we have this map, it's not going to tell you where to drill your wells. This is going to tell us where the best places to start doing more detailed exploration.
Thank you very much. Senator Barrasso.
Thanks so very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, so a well-known investor backing your company recently stated the following about geologic hydrogen, quote, "It could be gigantic or it could be a bust, but if it's really there, wow." So would you tell us why you think geologic hydrogen has real promise and won't be a bust?
So I think the science of geologic hydrogen formation in the subsurface is very clear. There are hydrogen seeps all over the planet that have been documented. The question that needs to be answered, and to echo Dr. Ellis here, is what we don't know is, are there accumulations that are large enough to be commercial, right? If you've got a really small puff of hydrogen from one well out in a farmer's field, that's hard to commercialize, right? So, the bust scenario is not that there's no hydrogen under the ground. That science is established. The bust scenario is, hey, there's nothing big enough, or the only thing that's big is in the middle of Greenland. I mean, that's the scenario that we're talking about, where this ends up not being something that we believe it could be.
So Dr. Ellis, following, I understand you're still in the process of modeling the world's reserves of the geologic hydrogen, and your work isn't finished. Can you give us a general sense of the size of the world's reserves of geologic hydrogen, and in your estimate, how much of these reserves might be economically recoverable?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator. It's very difficult at this time to answer that with much precision. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've done this global model, and it could be anywhere from thousands of megatons, which really would not be very important, to potentially billions of megatons. And so I think that at this point, the best we can do is to say, as Mr. Johnson has said, is that it's very likely that there's large quantities in the subsurface, and what we need to understand is the potential for these accumulations that could be economically developed. But the key point, I think, is that even just a small fraction of what we think is in the subsurface could constitute a significant resource. And so I think that we absolutely should be doing the work, the research, to better understand the potential for the accumulations that could answer that question.
Mr. Johnson, I want to expand a little bit on one of the things you touched on in your introductory remarks. And what would you say are the principal advantages of geologic hydrogen over other types of hydrogen production? You mentioned that in your remarks. I said, and when it comes to land and water use, how does geologic hydrogen compare with hydrogen production using, say, wind and solar energy?
Yeah. So I go back to just pointing out that this is a primary source of energy, and that's an additive energy source to the system. When you look at fossil hydrogen from natural gas, or fossil hydrogen with carbon capture or electrolysis, all those take more energy than the hydrogen molecule actually carries at the end of the day. Geologic hydrogen is essentially decoupled from renewables or from natural gas. So you don't have this challenge of this turning off when the wind stops blowing or the sun stops shining. And that's really critical, because hydrogen as its own product is actually fairly limited. The value of hydrogen is that it can be converted into ammonia, or can be converted into sustainable aviation fuel. That means you have to have an expensive facility on the back end taking this hydrogen and running. You've got to run that facility 24/7 to make that pay. So, as Senator Manchin said, you can't run an ammonia plant on intermittent sunshine hydrogen. So the value of geologic hydrogen is the sense that this will be baseload hydrogen 24/7, 365. The last point I'd make here is the best gas storage assets we have in this country are depleted gas reservoirs. So if you imagine drilling and producing geologic hydrogen out of a reservoir and eventually producing what that reservoir had to offer, that reservoir will now contain pore space that could be used as geologic storage for other forms of hydrogen, converting that to baseload. So this really ties into the broader system.
So what do you see as the biggest threats to the commercial production of geologic hydrogen in the months and the years ahead?
I think one key threat that's important to talk about is ensuring that we have technology agnostic approaches towards incentives. Geologic hydrogen we see in the long term as being something that will be highly economic on its own. But as is everything, this will take a lot of time and effort to get there, and to incentivize private capital to take those risks, it's really critical that geologic hydrogen is not on an uneven playing field. So if every other form of hydrogen received tax credits and this did not, it would be very challenging to see the amount of private investment required to get this going. That's one. I mean, on just the true commercial side, it's a matter of finding large enough resources at high enough purity, close enough to markets. We're already quite confident that if we find it, off-takers and people who want to utilize that hydrogen to produce energy transition materials will be there.
Yeah, the Chairman and I are just talking about the 45E tax credits. I mean, the issue is the government may put its hand on the scale here, because you just said you could get by excluding any kind of tax credits. You don't need any of that. But if the government gets involved and says they want to subsidize one versus another and chooses winners or losers, it would seem to be devastating.
That would be very challenging. That would slow things down quite a bit. And I would say, look, long term, I believe that this could stand on its own as an energy source with nothing. In the short term, I will tell you right now, the first reservoir somebody finds will not be the best. It'll take a while to find the Permian of hydrogen, right? And so the first time somebody finds it, they might not be achieving the ideal optimal cost targets that we'll be achieving in 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Heinrich.
Mr. Johnson, can you kind of drill down into the weeds on what production, in your view, will actually look like? How analogous is it to geothermal production or oil and gas production? And talk a little bit about, you've been talking a lot about reservoirs, but talk about stimulation of hydrogen that is bound up in other compounds versus already precipitated hydrogen that's in a reservoir of its own, and how we should look at those two things and how they're related.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So Coloma right now is focused on finding reservoirs that are naturally filled with hydrogen. And to talk about what production would look like on that, it would be a series of wells that look very similar to the wells that we drill for water, geothermal power, oil and gas, up to wellheads. That hydrogen would then be gathered into a central purification facility, much like natural gas is. The hydrogen would be further purified and then sold to an ammonia plant or a SAF plant or something like that. So pretty similar to what we see in today's energy industry. Regarding a stimulated hydrogen concept, that's something that Coloma is involved in on the R&D side of. We're pretty far away from conceptualizing what that system would look like, and I would actually defer you back to the DOE, who has spent more time working on that.
Ms. Wang, do you want to address that?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Heinrich, for that question. So the focus of the ARPA-E effort that we're supporting, in fact, is very much on the stimulation extraction side. So that's distinct from what my colleagues here have been discussing related to the natural hydrogen, the deposits that could exist. And we think this could be a ripe opportunity for us, because if we could actually stimulate it, so actually introduce high-pressure steam into the subsurface with these rocks, these iron-rich rocks.
Okay. So we're talking about similar iron ore to what we've mined commercially historically.
That's what
in the upper
we believe
Midwest,
right now. And of course, there's exploration to be done in terms of the research to understand what kinds of rocks will actually produce at the rates that we want, the high rates of production of hydrogen from that chemical reaction that occurs with these types of iron-rich rock formations. So that's really key, but we have to understand that. And that could be an avenue for us to pursue moving forward, in addition to the natural hydrogen that potentially is all around the world.
Dr. Johnson, back to you. We all know that hydrogen itself is not a greenhouse gas. But if you leak hydrogen, it changes the abundance of methane, of water vapor, of ozone, other very potent greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And we're just now getting a handle on methane leakage after 100 years of just letting it leak out of our pipes. How should we be thinking about this now so that we get it right, so that hydrogen leakage does not become an issue the way that methane, fugitive methane has?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I appreciate it. So there have been studies come out, and there's a prevailing view that there is a greenhouse gas impact of hydrogen. The degree to which it does that per ton is still debated, and there's lots of different papers. But we agree, hydrogen leakage is not good for the environment. The good thing is the industrial gas companies have operated hydrogen storage, underground hydrogen storage facilities, hydrogen wells, hydrogen wellheads, and hydrogen purification for a number of decades. And they've actually tracked hydrogen leakage through that time. And so the data on this is actually pretty solid. Typically, you see between 0.1 to 1% hydrogen leakage from the system, storage all the way through to distribution, with a well-operated system around 0.25%. That's very low. Hydrogen is so valuable, and hydrogen leaks are important to match that. You're really incentivized to monitor and address leakage. But again, we're early on this, right? So Coloma, as we get into our business, we will commit to being top of the field and looking at this. There are ways to monitor hydrogen leakage that are currently being developed, and we'll stay on top of those. So we think it's a critical issue. We'll stay on top of it, but it's also really critical that we think about hydrogen leakage holistically, and we think about hydrogen leakage from every form of hydrogen production, and don't get so focused on hydrogen leakage from this one element.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, this is something that we can get right from the start, which we didn't do with oil and gas. And there's an economic incentive in states like mine to capture methane because it's a product and it's got value. However, we have large number, the majors have been very good at that. But as you go down to smaller and smaller producers, we still have huge problems with fugitive methane. So if we can get this right out of the gate, we can avoid a lot of that.
Yeah, we completely agree.
Chairman.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Dr. Wang, if I could just start with you, I want to talk a little bit about the regional impact or potential regional impact of some of what we've been discussing. Last year, the governor of my state, along with the governors of Nebraska and Iowa, signed a memorandum of understanding to work on a clean hydrogen hub. They're very interested in what this could do, potentially this technology could do for the region. I wonder if you could just speak to the impact that this technology could have on the economies of Midwest states like Missouri, what we might see going forward. I mean, what do you assess as the possibilities there?
Thank you, Senator Hawley, for that question. And certainly, right now, we are at the very early stages of research and understanding how to stimulate and potentially extract hydrogen from the subsurface. And so, certainly, if there are rocks that are iron-rich in nature that we can stimulate, there could be many opportunities in your region and elsewhere to be able to use geologic hydrogen as a clean source of energy in the future.
Very good. Let me just ask you about the potential effect here on farmers. Mr. Johnson's mentioned a couple times, I think, that one of the byproducts of hydrogen or hydrogen can be used to make ammonia. That's a key component, obviously, in the production of nitrogen fertilizers. That's of great interest to my state. We're a farming state. Of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine severely disrupted the supply of fertilizer all across the globe, much to the detriment of farmers in Missouri and across the country. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the importance of hydrogen and these kind of technologies to farmers in particular. What sort of benefits might they see from this technology were it to come online more fully?
Absolutely. So we know that hydrogen is a great feedstock and it's used to create ammonia for fertilizer. So if we can really stimulate and extract this hydrogen and produce very large quantities at very low cost, I think this could have significant implications to help and support the farmers.
Yeah, very good. Mr. Johnson, let me just ask you, speaking of farms and rural areas, you have said, I think in your written statement, that a growing geologic hydrogen will create new domestic high-paying blue and white-collar jobs, particularly in rural communities where the resource is discovered. I'm interested in the blue-collar rural community part of that. Can you extrapolate there? Can you tell us more? What do you think the potential might be?
Well, from a probability standpoint, that this country is huge and most of it's rural. So when we find new hydrogen resources, they'll generally be in rural communities. Cities have built up around energy resources, not the other way around. Our view is the most likely commercial avenue for geologic hydrogen will be infrastructure that's built close to point of production. So if you find a reservoir of hydrogen in a rural community, you'll probably follow that up with an ammonia production facility or a sustainable aviation fuel production facility. And so drilling wells is a temporary effort where you're drilling wells and you're going to hire local labor to do that. Those long-term operating plants create high-paying jobs that last forever, right? And everybody finances these plants based on 20 or 30-year lifetimes, but we all know they operate for 60 years and 70 years as the backbone of local economies. And so geologic hydrogen can really establish that kind of backbone in rural areas. And specifically about farming, right? We import 2.4 million tons of ammonia per year in the United States. Missouri was impacted by the spike in ammonia prices, which had nothing to do with the cost of ammonia in the U.S. It was the cost people were paying for ammonia in Europe getting from Russia, right? The U.S. is the largest net importer of ammonia today. Food security and energy security are both national security. So this can impact our ammonia and our farming and our food system in considerable ways.
And what would be, when you talk about blue-collar jobs, help me understand what the potential is there. What kind of jobs are we thinking might be associated with this technology? I mean, what kind of jobs might it create for blue-collar workers in particular?
Plant operators, facility operators, outside operators, technicians, mechanics, all the people who work. If you look at the workforce that operates chemical plants, refineries, ammonia facilities, liquefiers, there's majority of those jobs are blue-collar, skilled craft jobs.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to go around real quick if you have another question, Senator Hawley, if you have another one. Well, I have one. I think Senator Heinrich has one, if you have one, okay. Mine, very quickly, Dr. Ellis, is for you. You mentioned geologic hydrogen could be located in the offshore. Was that correct? Offshore. Does that mean that we're going to need to look at potential changes to the federal leasing programs to accommodate geological hydrogen?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Manchin. As far as those sorts of regulatory issues, that's really not the purview of the USGS, so I think that would have to be directed to other agencies as far as...
Maybe I'll go to the private sector. Mr. Johnson, what do you think?
Well,
we wrote the bill, and we're still a little bit concerned here. We think we'll have to make some adjustments, but
Well, look, I would say Coloma is purely focused today on onshore resources,
Yes.
just because those are far less expensive to explore for today. But yeah, I expect that we would have to update the way federal leasing programs are done in offshore if we see this as a new resource.
Senator Heinrich.
It's probably a question we need to pose to Bo and Interior, I would think.
Yeah.
Dr. Ellis, I want to ask, and this isn't specific to geologic hydrogen, but given where we are with the hydrogen industry writ large right now, is USGS thinking through potential partnerships with national labs? I'm thinking of Sandia, for example, that advises on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and does other subsurface repository science. Are you thinking through some of the partnerships that can help us characterize the potential for the sorts of reservoirs post-production that Mr. Johnson was alluding to?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator Heinrich. Yes, so we do have active collaborations with a number of the national labs, not Sandia in particular at this time, but we are looking at in addition to looking at geologic hydrogen as a resource, we also have another group looking at underground hydrogen storage, and so we are in close communication with them, and they are also working with the labs. And we do recognize, as Mr. Johnson had said, that these, depleted hydrogen reservoirs would then obviously be great candidates for underground hydrogen storage. So,
Who's involved in that partnership right now? Who are some of your partners on that work?
So on the geologic hydrogen side, we are working with Lawrence Berkeley Lab and Lawrence Livermore Lab, and then Argonne Lab at this point. And
on repository science?
On the repository science, I have to get back to you in our written response.
Look forward to that. Thank you.
Senator Hawley.
Mr. Johnson, since the chairman gave me another opportunity to ask a question.
Maybe that was a mistake.
Let me just ask you just a quick question about the ARPA-E grant that your company has received. I think the announcement said it was $900,000. Does it sound right to you? That's correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So can you give us a sense of how you're going to use the money? And here's why I'm asking. It looks like you're an awfully well-capitalized company. According to your SEC filings, you just completed a $245.7 million financing round. You're getting money from Amazon. You're getting money from Bill Gates. Forbes reports that Gates and others are giving you $100 million. It's great. I mean, I'm happy for you. But I'm just wondering, you're getting now money on top of that from the government, $900,000 of taxpayer money. So can you just, I'm sure you have a good plan to use it well. I'm just wondering what it is.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that's a different amount of money than what we've been raising in the private sector. The investment into Coloma is based on Coloma using its data advantage and technology advantage to find existing natural hydrogen reservoirs, and that's our focus. And so when the investors, when our shareholders look at it, they're investing because we're going for that near-term opportunity. Stimulation for hydrogen, this works. We're doing it today in our lab. The big question is, can you produce enough gas quickly enough out of a well for the economics to work? The science of it is real. It'll probably take 5 to 7 years for us to really know if that works. Our shareholders don't want to fund that. the direction they gave us is focus purely on near-term hydrogen exploration. You know, if you want to do this, you have to go find partners, academic partners. So we're participating in a larger academic group. That $900,000 goes to work that we're doing alongside universities and supporting them with data and work. But it's not, that $900,000 will not be used exclusively by us. That's to fund a partnership and a consortium.
Oh, so, okay, so some of, it sounds like then you're partnering with the universities, is what you say. So some of this will redound to the public. I mean, if the universities get some of this information, the technology, the benefit of this, then that's going to be more broadly available. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Our in-kind contribution on this is a lot of the data that we've already assembled that can help move this further along. I mean, we're a small part of a much broader program.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, let me thank all of you for being here and sharing your knowledge with us, which we appreciate, helps us immensely. When we did the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we thought that hydrogen was a real player because we knew it was proven technology, and we just knew it never had the investments made to mature it. And so we chose that as one of the ones we have tax credits and incentives for. It was because we thought the private sector could bring it to market once the public sector identified where we could and how we could minimize the risk you're taking. And in any good, I think in any good partnership, when I think a government as your partner, not your provider, we take some of that risk factor because we want you to succeed. What you're telling me here, Mr. Johnson, is that, and what all of you have confirmed, is that we have a cache of reserves that now we have proven, correct? And we just haven't tapped them yet? Is that what we're saying, Mr. Johnson?
I don't think we've proven the volume of reserves yet. We know it's there. We don't know how much. That's still a question that needs to be answered. So when you say proven reserves, that's a very charged term in the resource space, so I have to be careful there.
Yeah, because at one time we were importing natural gas to our country because we needed the energy.
Yes.
And then we found out that we had trapped gas in our shell and was able to unleash that, which gave us a tremendous boom as far as our economy and our self-reliance. I just think that the ability, and what you've told me, we gave credits, as you know, in different categories about the emissions of hydrogen, and gas is the easiest of all the ways we can produce hydrogen, as I see it, except if it's already produced. That's the difference. So it's exciting what you're saying here. So we look forward to exploring this even more, and we have until the end of tomorrow before any of the members can provide any questions they might have. And with that, let me say thank you again, and to all of you for being here, and the committee is adjourned.